Currying in JavaScript may sound complicated, but I'm here to try and make it as simple as possible for you. The concept behind currying is basically taking a function and reducing the number of arguments in that function. So essentially, you just keep reducing the number of arguments that go into that function so you can call it with lesser arguments, which means you are simply creating a new function that already has all those arguments applied. Now, what I mean by that is, consider you have a function and we're going to call it sum, and it's going to take two parameters. So generally what we do is something like this. Consider I'm returning the sum a plus b. Now usually what someone would do is something like console.log, and I'll just call sum and I'll pass 1 comma 2. So this would give me 3, right? You can see it in the console, it's giving me 3. So this is what we do generally. Now to explain you how currying works, like, we basically need to take this argument and we need to break it down into smaller arguments. That is the core concept of currying. So what I mean by that is, I'm going to comment this out and I'm going to write another function which is going to do the same thing, but it's going to be written like this. You say function sum, I'm going to pass a, and then within it I'm going to return another function and I'm going to pass b, and within it I'm going to return nothing but a plus b. Now to make this work, all I have to do is I have to break these arguments down into two arguments. So if I write it like this and I save, you can see I still get the output as 3. Now how is this happening? How does this part work? So essentially what's happening here is, when I write sum and I pass 1 and then 2 after that, what happens is the sum takes 1 first, it calls this function, this sum a takes 1, and then it returns a function, it returns this entire function, right? So when sum passes 2 as the parameter, as the argument, and it calls the function, sum already has this new function assigned to it after it had executed this. So when sum calls 2, sum will be assigned to this function already, so 2 will get passed down to b. Alright, so when 2 gets passed down to b, this function must have executed, and since sum after passing 2 was calling the function b, it is going to return a plus b, which is ultimately going to give us 1 plus 2, which is equal to 3. Now you would say, how is a still giving us the value of 1? That is because this function that you see is in the lexical environment of this function sum. So what I mean by that is, lexical means the local memory as well as the lexical environment of the parent. So basically whatever variable that I create over here within this function will have access to that variable as well as the variables within its lexical parent. Now for this function, the lexical parent is sum. So whatever variable I create over here, this function will also be able to access this variable no matter what. So that is the reason why this a which you see here, which was given the value of 1, later on when it gets returned as a plus b, it still always holds the value of that a as 1 when it's being executed, because this function is within the lexical environment of this sum function. So that is basically how currying works. We take a function and we break down its arguments into smaller parts, and we return functions taking each of those arguments, and then we perform the major operation at the end. Alright, so now just to go a little more in deep, I'm going to show you another way to write this function, and it's going to return us the same sum, which is nothing but 3. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to write a function curry, and I'm going to pass an argument f, and then I'm going to return from here another function that's going to be nothing but a. It's going to take an argument a, and over here after that I'm going to return another function that takes nothing but the argument b, and this does nothing but it returns f of a comma b. Alright, and then over here I'm going to write a function sum. It's going to take nothing but a comma b, and after that I'm going to return nothing but a plus b. And now to call all of this, all I'm going to do here is, in this console log, I'm just going to add curry, and I'm going to pass sum as well to the as one of the arguments. So now we are breaking down this into 3 arguments, sum, 1 and 2, and we are passing it to curry. So now if I save this, you will notice I'll still get the output as 3. Let me go ahead and save this. I saved, and you can see here I'm still getting 3 in the console. Now why is this working? This is working because when I first console log and I call curry, the curry is going to take sum function as the first argument, the sum function that we created over here. Now notice we are not calling sum here, we are just passing sum as the reference. So this curry will first of all take the function sum over here as the argument. So this f is nothing but the function sum, and it is holding its reference. So when this curry of sum is executed, it will return this. It will return this entire function which is underneath it. So when this is executed, we will get this function over here, the one with the taking the argument of a. So after sum, when we pass 1 as the argument, so basically when we do this part, when we pass 1 as the argument, the curry sum had already been executed and had returned us this. So when we pass 1 as the argument, a takes this function is going to be executed, and 1 maps to the a argument that's over here, and then after this whole part is executed, it's going to return us nothing but this function which is underneath the parent function a, parent function taking the argument a. So now basically when curry of sum of 1 has been executed, curry is nothing but it's equal to this, the return function that's been returned from here. So now when these two are executed, curry is equal to this. So when we execute 2 after that, when we pass the 2 argument after that by calling the curry function again, curry at that point is equal to this function. So b is going to do nothing but it's going to take 2 as the argument, and then this last function does nothing but it returns this function taking the arguments a comma b. So after these 3 have been called, 2 at the last, 2 is going to be assigned to this function, and this function does nothing but it returns f of a comma b, and b is going to be mapped to 2, while a is going to be mapped to 1 because it holds the lexical scope from a present in its lexical parent, and f is also going to account to that sum function because f within this function also holds the lexical scope of the f which was passed as the argument from above. So the f and the a you see over here are totally going to work and are going to take their respective values, f for the sum function and a as the number 1 argument that we see here, because these two are getting passed down from the functions above this function, right? And this function is within the lexical environment of curry and the function taking the argument a. So that's why when we return this f of a comma b, it is going to hold the reference for from its respective parent functions. So this is going to be nothing but f is going to map to sum, a is going to map to 1, and b is going to map to 2. So this is the same as calling sum of sum bracket 1 comma 2. When we return this, so when all 3 of these has been called, when we call this at last, it's going to call this function, it's going to return nothing but sum of 1 comma 2 aka f bracket a comma b, and this is going to go over here because this f is nothing but this function, and since we are returning, we are going to go to this function and we are going to return whatever the value we get from this function, and a comma b is nothing but this a comma b that we had passed from here. So that's going to do nothing but it's going to take sum of 1 comma 2 and we are going to return 1 plus 2, which is nothing but 3. And that is why when I save this the console still prints us 3 and everything works fine. So this was a little bit more advanced deep dive into currying, but this is also another way you can implement this function that you see over here. This is obviously a more simpler way, but just to give you a more better and proper understanding of what currying means, I also decided to implement this. So yeah, I hope you got a proper understanding of what currying means. It does look a bit complicated, but if you try to wrap your head around what I just said, you might just get it properly. And so if you have any doubt regarding this, you can absolutely comment down in the comment section and I will try my best to answer all your doubts and queries. So yeah, this is all about the video. If you liked it, please don't forget to like and subscribe.